Hey everybody, welcome to Wellness Wednesday. I'm gonna give everybody a second to join. So I just want to go ahead and say welcome. And the next couple of weeks are gonna be really stressful and busy for everybody, with final exams and final papers and presentations. So now more than ever, it's gonna be really important to have a good study strategy in place. So today I'm gonna talk about different study techniques that'll help you work smarter and not harder. And these tips are adapted from a book I read, so you guys don't have to, called Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning. So the main objective from this book is studying less but with greater intensity. So you save time, but you get the maximum amount of output from your studying sessions. So in this era of social media and digital distractions, many students have to do a lot of multitasking, right? So there's no such thing as successful multitasking, despite what we tell ourselves, because much of that time spent is going to be wasted on what's called context switching, which is where the brain has to restart and refocus. So for example, if you're watching Netflix while you study, if you focus in on Netflix, your brain has to refocus when you go back to studying, and a lot of that time is spent from what you think you're studying is really just context switching back and forth from Netflix to studying. So highly successful students have generally learned to avoid multitasking. Instead, they spend lots of time doing low intensity work instead of doing like low intensity work with numerous distractions. These students are going to work for shorter periods at a higher intensity, like I said before. So this type of studying is more effective and it leads to greater achievement gains. So today I'm just going to give a few different types of studying that will help you, again, study less, but have a greater intensity and greater gains of what you're actually learning and taking in. So the first type of studying that you might want to do is conducting a pretest. So when students practice answering questions, even incorrectly, before learning the content, their future learning is going to be enhanced. And research has actually shown that pretesting improves your post-test results more than spending the same amount of time just studying, which is really good. So maybe like finding online tests that have like the same content of what maybe your study guide has, and trying to go ahead and take it and seeing what your baseline is of what you actually already know, so that when you're studying, you actually know what kind of things you need a little bit extra support and help on. So the next thing you might want to do is engaging in spaced practice. So spacing out your study sessions or focusing on one topic for a short period of time on different days. So instead of like bulk studying for like 6 hours the night before, for 6 days before that, just study for like an hour. You get the same amount of studying in, and you don't really feel overwhelmed by having to block out a specific amount of time or burnt out by having to study for 6 hours, because that's hard on anybody. So one way to do this is you can create flashcards that can be used for your space practice and self-quizzing. You should create different piles when reviewing those flashcards, and the cards you're able to answer immediately should be placed in the pile to review later on. So you're not going to keep reviewing the same things you already know, so you can use the time to the best of your abilities. The next thing is you might want to start doing self-quizzing. So testing has a negative connotation in this era of standardized testing, but it's a form of active retrieval practice. So the things that you already know or things that you might not even realize that you know, self-quizzing will help you become aware of those things. So you can make test questions for yourself as you learn a new concept, thinking about the types of questions you might ask on a quiz or a test. So for example, if you know that your professor is really heavy on like matching questions, true or false questions, doing some self-quizzing of those types of questions will be really beneficial for you. So the next thing is interleaving practice. This was something I actually wasn't really familiar with before reading this book, but it's a more effective method of studying, and it's to work on a set of problems that are related but not all of the same kind. So like, for example, if you're having like a math test, a set of math word problems that call for whatever you're learning, whether it be like, for example, like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So all these problems can be solved, but not using the same exact strategy. So this is really good for like your STEM classes. And so it's a lot more effective than doing like one of the same exact type of problem, like one after the other, because at that point it's hard to tell if you're just memorizing a specific way to do it or if you're actually learning the content. And the last point I want to go over is paraphrasing and reflecting. So many of us have read a few paragraphs in a textbook only to realize that we have like no idea what we just read and that we didn't really retain a single concept of what we just read. And so you enter this loop of just reading it over and over and over and hoping that something sticks. So to combat this, you should utilize intentional learning strategies. So these include relating what's being learned to prior knowledge, thinking about how you would explain this to someone else or like a fellow student, and reflecting on and asking questions about the content. And I will say that this is probably the study technique I utilize the most, where I'll get a study partner or whoever I'm around, even if it's somebody who's not in the class with me, and I'll say, hey, do you mind if I just explain this concept to you really quickly? And being able to put it in your own words really does help you understand how much you understand about the topic. And if there's something that, like, maybe they'll ask you a question of, oh, well, how does this specific part work? And you're like, oh, I'm not sure. That's a cue for you to say, okay, I need to look a little bit more into this. So it's something I utilize a lot and I find is really, really helpful for, especially when it's like less of a concrete concept and it's more of like maybe a theory or something that is has a lot of moving parts. It really does help me. So I really hope that some of these techniques that'll help you study less but have greater intensity and greater learning gains. I hope this was helpful to you. And good luck with your finals, and we'll see you at the next Wellness Wednesday. Thanks for coming, guys.